Everyone keeps secrets, but no one better than Segal Awad. Among her friends, secrets with surprising twists. Hidden from her husband, unspoken secrets of betrayal. Shared secrets of the heart about lovers. And untold secrets between mother and daughter. But Segal Awad learned one lesson too late. It's the secret that you don't tell anyone that can kill you. In true crime, investigation and conviction may take years. But every detective knows that the crucial clue is always there, somewhere in the first 72 hours. Calgary, Alberta, 1992. A young Ethiopian woman has been murdered in her apartment. Detectives Nick Kiska and Wayne Lowinger arrive at the crime scene. A uniformed officer is speaking with the victim's husband. His name is Shakeb Mohammed. 1 hour ago, he discovered the body of his wife, Segal Awad, in one of the bedrooms.
She was kind of on her side, and the face was away from the doorway facing the wall, and there was a ligature, what appeared to be an electrical cord that had been tightly wrapped around her neck.
Some of her braids are trapped beneath the cord. Beads are scattered on the carpet.
It kind of indicates that during the course of placing the ligature around the neck, there was a struggle.
The cord has been ripped from a clock radio so violently that only a stub remains. There are scratch marks on her neck, blood on her mouth and nose. Segal has been attacked violently, but there is no sign of sexual assault. Detective Kiska spots something strange on the floor. A small scrap of paper. Written on it is the victim's address. Aside from the murder scene, the rest of the apartment is tidy, undisturbed. It appears nothing has been stolen.
We didn't find any indication that the apartment door had been forced, leading us to the conclusion that either the door was open or that the victim, in fact, knew the person.
Kiska's partner, Detective Lowinger, questions Segal's husband, who appears emotionless.
We started to talk to the husband to try and gather information about his wife and how that particular day had gone so that we could begin to do our investigation.
According to the husband, that morning Segal prepared their daughter for daycare. He and Segal usually attended half-day English classes together. But Segal said she had a doctor's appointment so would not be going. He left at 8:15. He claims it was the last time he saw his wife alive.
He had indicated to us that he had gone to school. He left school and he began to wander the downtown core.
The husband's English class ended at noon, but he says he didn't return home until 5, and that's when he found his wife's body and called police. Detective Lowinger is suspicious.
He doesn't appear to be coming real clean about where he's been and what his activities are. So the red flags run up.
He spent the whole afternoon alone, didn't talk to anyone, so he has no alibi, and he shows no grief.
Normally a husband would have some emotion. This man didn't show any. None. Not a tear, nothing.
Police bag the husband's clothes for forensic analysis, hoping to find traces of his wife's blood on them. Then they take him to the station for further questioning. A pathologist is called to the scene to help police fix a time of death. But the air conditioning has been on all day. It's enough of a factor to make it difficult to pinpoint an exact time. The only conclusion is that Segal was killed in the afternoon. But the pathologist makes one important discovery.
There was some bits of fleshy material in her fingernails.
Segal may have scratched her attacker. If so, the killer's DNA will be found under her nails. Police preserve the evidence and send the body for autopsy. The next day, Detectives Kiska and Lowinger go door to door within the tight-knit Ethiopian community. They need to learn more about the life of Segal and her husband.
The best way to profile the husband, the victim, their relationship is to speak with people who they commonly associate with.
News of the murder has spread through the community. People are shocked, but they offer little help to police. No one really knew the couple. Finally, the detectives get a break. They meet a cab driver named Samatar, who says he was a friend of Segal's. He still can't believe she's dead. He tells detectives they met as students in the same English language class, and they often had coffee together. The detectives question him about the victim and her husband. He says theirs was an arranged marriage, as is the custom among many Ethiopians. But he's not sure how happy they were together. At the morgue, the autopsy is performed by Dr. John Butt.
Well, the conclusion in this case was that she died as a result of asphyxia, and it was due to ligature strangulation.
What about the flesh under her fingernails?
It was her own flesh from her neck. This is not uncommon in a homicidal ligature strangulation. The victim is trying to slacken the device around her neck, so she tries to get her hands underneath it.
It's a dead end. There's no biological evidence that can lead to Segal's killer. 2 days after the murder, the detectives return to Segal's apartment to understand more about the victim's world.
It appeared that he was living in the master bedroom and that she was occupying the secondary bedroom. We started to realize that the victim and her husband were almost living two separate lives within the same apartment.
On the top shelf in Segal's bedroom, police find a traveling bag. It's packed with her clothes, as if she were ready to leave on a trip. And under the clothes, a jewelry case, locked.
We ultimately broke into the case, and it was kind of like opening Pandora's box.
It contains a bundle of letters.
Airmail letters that had been mailed from Rome, Italy, addressed to the victim. Although some of the letters were very current, none of them bore the address of where she lived. There was actually a different address on the envelopes.
The letters are handwritten in Amharic, the language of Ethiopia. Police will have to get the letters translated. In the box, the detective also finds one single picture taken in Rome.
It was a photograph depicting the victim, an unidentified male, and someone that we were sure was our cabbie.
Why didn't Samatar the cabbie tell them about being with Segal in Rome? Who is the other man in the picture? And what does the husband know about all this? Less than 48 hours ago, the lifeless body of Segal Awad was discovered, sprawled across her bedroom floor. Police already have two suspects, Segal's husband and a cab driver who may have been more than a friend to Segal. Detective Kiska goes to the address written on the letters found in Segal's closet. It's the home of Mariam Shaheen, a good friend of Segal's. Why did the letters to the victim come here?
She told us that her address was used by the victim and that the letters were, she characterized them as love letters from someone the victim was acquainted with back in Rome.
Mariam has been covering for Segal, who had an affair in Italy with a man named Mustafa Musa. Segal met Mustafa in Rome, where she lived for a year while her husband was establishing residency in Canada. Miriam tells the detective that Segal was madly in love with Mustafa. He had written her every week since she joined her husband in Calgary 3 months ago. The detective shows her the photo. Although she doesn't know the man in the sunglasses, Miriam identifies Mustafa as the man with the dreadlocks. Could Segal's husband have found out about this love affair? Has Mustafa been here to see her?
We made some inquiries with Canada Immigration, and we determined that no one under that name had either made application for entry to Canada or had in fact arrived in Canada.
Mustafa can't be of any help to police until they can find him in Italy. But Samatar, the cab driver, is going to have to answer some tough questions. He has lied to police about his relationship with Segal. The photograph puts him in Rome with her. What other secrets is he keeping from police?
We confronted him with the photo, and he just told us that that wasn't him. It was someone that looked like him.
The cabbie swears it's a coincidence. He's never been to Rome. He doesn't even know the two men in the picture. Kiska is not convinced. He demands to know where Samatar was the day of the murder. The cabbie can't believe he's a suspect. He was working that day, and besides, he would never have hurt Segal. She was too precious to him. He reveals he was more than a friend. He was her confidant.
Although he may not have used these words himself, it became apparent that he was in love with the woman, but that those feelings weren't shared by her. So he was definitely in the suspect pool.
Is it possible that frustrated love drove the cabbie to commit murder? While Detective Kiska leaves to check out Samatar's alibi, Detective Lowinger has been trying to confirm the husband's story.
We tried to establish the husband's alibi. He told us he left the school, he walked a distance. It took him a certain period of time to do that. We did time that walk from point A to point B, and we weren't able to come up with the same kind of times he was giving us. He says he stops for coffee at a coffee place. No one remembers him there. We tried to establish the fact that he was actually at school that day and couldn't clearly determine that. We couldn't find any evidence to support what he was saying in any way, shape, or form.
Only one part of the husband's story checks out. Segal did have a doctor's appointment on the day she was murdered. Detective Kiska pays a visit to the clinic. The doctor is reluctant to discuss one of her patients, even with the police. But she lets Kiska read Segal's file. He learns that Segal was here for a checkup. She recently had an abortion. Did Segal come alone to the clinic? No, she was with a man. And not her husband, she was with the cabbie. Once again, the detective confronts Samatar. The cabbie says Segal swore him to secrecy about the abortion. But now that it's out in the open, Samatar tells the whole story.
He started to tell us that she wasn't in love with her husband, that she was seeking something far better than what she had at that particular time, and that her husband had no idea that she was pregnant.
Samatar says she wanted to leave her husband and her loveless marriage, and having a child would tie her down. Kiska is confused. She was already tied down. She and her husband have a daughter. But the cabbie reveals that the daughter is not theirs. She's an orphan they brought to Canada to speed up their immigration claim. Kiska's beginning to believe the cabbie has been truthful all along. So he asks Samatar for a favor. He wants to attend the private reception following Segal's funeral to meet any other friends and family. He thinks that people will speak more openly with Samatar at his side. Detective Lowinger remains outside, watching who comes and goes. Only one person is missing, Segal's husband.
I wasn't sure up until the point he doesn't show up for the funeral. That lack of concern on his part told me that I think this is the right guy.
The detectives have two theories. Either the husband discovered that Segal had an abortion against his wishes, or he found out about her affair with Mustafa and caught her leaving with her bags packed. 6 days after Segal's murder, the results of the forensic tests on the husband's clothes come in. Negative. No blood at all. Police have motive and opportunity, but no hard proof. Yet, they can't arrest the husband. The next day, Miriam calls the detective over to her apartment. She's been translating the letters he left with her. She's found something that Segal kept secret, even from her. Segal was already pregnant in Italy. Father of her child wasn't her husband. It was Mustafa.
It was very apparent that the author of the letters was deeply in love with the victim, that he was very excited about the fact that she was expecting his child, and that they would ultimately be together at some point in time.
At Kiska's request, Miriam calls a phone number in Rome, found for Mustafa in one of the letters. Miriam is informed that Mustafa is not in Italy. He's in Canada, and has been for almost 2 weeks. It's been 8 days since Segal Awad was found murdered. Detective Kiska wants to speak with her lover, Mustafa, but he has no idea where he is, until he receives a surprising call from Toronto police.
I was told that they had attended a disturbance. 2 male occupants of this particular residence were involved in some kind of a fight or altercation, that one of those individuals is likely responsible for the death of a woman in Calgary.
Kiska takes the very next flight to Toronto. At the police station, Kiska interviews one of the 2 men taken into custody. It's Mahmoud, Segal's uncle, whom Kiska met at the funeral in Calgary. Mahmoud explains that Mustafa Musa came to stay with him 2 weeks ago. But during the past week, Mustafa has been saying strange things about Segal. Last night, Mustafa said he might have killed her. Stunning news.
It still didn't make him a killer, but I would say that we were at least as much interested in him than we were in the husband.
The detective finally meets face-to-face with Segal's secret lover, Mustafa Musa. He claims he has nothing to hide, although he admits he did enter the country with a false passport. He confirms he is the man in the photo taken in Rome. The other man in the sunglasses is a cousin. And yes, he did write the letters to Segal. He loved her. But when Kiska asks about his confession to the uncle, Mustafa denies ever making one. The uncle is confused and emotionally upset.
The interrogation lasted several hours, and then kind of during the course of that, introduced this piece of paper and said, "Whose writing is this?"
Kiska shows Mustafa the handwritten note found at the crime scene, with the victim's address on it.
He readily admitted that it was his writing. So, I mean, that was very significant because it tied him directly to the crime scene.
But Mustafa swears he's never been to Calgary. Kiska thinks he's lying, but has no hard evidence to the contrary.
And of course, there were some big gaps because I couldn't provide him with the information as to how he got there, how he returned to Toronto, or any of those things. I think his parting words were, "Prove it."
Kiska intends to prove it. He arrests Mustafa and flies him to Calgary. The arrest is big news. Police release a photo of the suspect in hopes that someone can place him in Calgary around the time of the murder. They get just one tip. And once again, it comes from the cabbie, Samatar. A friend of his recognized the picture of Mustafa in the newspaper. He met Mustafa on a flight from Toronto to Calgary on July 8th, 2 days before the murder. Mustafa had nowhere to stay, so the cabbie's friend offered him a bed.
He was up very early, and they were sitting around in the kitchen, and he asked how he would find a particular address.
It was the morning of July 10th, the day of the murder. and the address was Segal's. With this revelation, police finally have the last piece of the puzzle. This is what police believe happened the afternoon of July 10th. Segal was alone in the apartment after returning from her doctor's appointment. She had packed her belongings and was ready to leave her husband and her daughter. Then, a knock at the door. But Segal wasn't expecting anyone. Least of all, Mustafa.
I'm sure that he expected that she would abandon her marriage and that they would kind of live happily ever after.
But Segal had no such plans. Mustafa expected her to be pregnant with his child and discovered she'd had an abortion. She had changed her mind. In a rage, he strangled her to death. He didn't notice that he had dropped his handwritten note, leaving behind a most crucial piece of evidence. It was this note and his love letters to Segal, found in the first hours of the investigation, which led police to Mustafa. Segal had many secrets, but she kept only one to herself. She wanted to start a new life, on her own terms, with no man to tie her down. And when that secret finally came out, it cost her her life. Mustafa Musa was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The stories on 72 Hours are true. The detectives and forensic scientists are the ones who actually worked on the case. The names of the victims are fictitious. The names of the convicted are real.